Well, we're here today with you, Curtis, and we're really excited to have you because this is just a great opportunity to learn some principles about what it means to do church and learn from the New Testament. So I guess I have a few questions for you, if that's okay.
Great. Yeah.
If you were trying to boil down, what you're teaching and what some of these principles are to kind of a baseline of where it's coming from and what you're trying to get across, do you have any kind of thoughts that you could speak to about that?
Yeah. I have a phrase that I love to use. I've used it like on email addresses since the internet first started, kind of a thing, is obey GC squared. And it just means obey the Great Commandment and the Great Commission, right? Love God, love others, make disciples who reproduce. And the thing that people most often misunderstand about that is they think it's something that's legalistic, right? Oh, obey. Wow, that sounds legalistic.
Yeah.
But in the Bible, obedience is just the flip side of love. It doesn't have the same connotation, that we sort of have in our culture. So, Jesus says, if you love me, you'll obey my commands, John in 1 John tells us this is love for God, to obey his commands, and his commands are not burdensome. So it's not like, we're working to do this. It's like, this is our joy because he loved us and we love him and we adore him. We want to do this. And it's that kind of a thing. And so, if we hear the word accountability, the same thing happens. We're thinking, accountability, that sounds like formal, transactional. That's not organic, that's not relational. But that's not what we're talking about at all. What we're talking about is this idea that we can grow and come to be more intimate with God and understand him and hear him by doing what he's asking us to do and being who he's asking us to be. And that's who we were wired to be. The other stuff, it's all fake, it's all artificial. So we have this opportunity to be who and what he wanted us to be. And that is the greatest thing. And so if I really love you and if you really love me, we want this for each other. We want this for each other individually. We want this for each other corporately. And that is what accountability is about. It's us together seeking out this fulfillment of who we were meant to be and how we were related to God and one another and creation, in ourselves. That's what it's about.
That's great. Yeah. It seems like a lot of what you do, and correct me if I'm wrong, but really works well in a global context. So you spend a lot of time overseas, working in different communities and different cultures. Do you feel like there's a problem applying this in like middle America, or do you think that people have any trouble doing that, or is there some kind of translation issue between what the New Testament teaches and how we're living now?
That is a great question. I think there are two issues that make it maybe a little tougher here than in many other places. One is that we are, in a sense, more satisfied. We're more comfortable. We feel safe. We feel that more or less we have our lives where we want them. So there's not this dissatisfaction, this yearning for more. And I think our senses have really become deadened to what God's intention for us is. And so it's kind of like we're anesthetized. The beautiful thing, though, is if people experience the kind of intimacy with God and with one another that he intended, they realize how shallow and pointless, the things are that we've been satisfied with. One other issue that isn't, unique to here, but is significant, is we're becoming a much more urban society. And so the relational chains in a city are shorter and shallower and more transient than kind of historically has been the case in more rural societies. And this is a global phenomenon. This is happening all over the world, not just in North America. But it means that our sense of relationship with one another is becoming more and more unfulfilling in a sense because of this urbanization and the patterns that are frequently set up in those urban societies. So that makes us unfamiliar with intimate trust relationships that God intends us to have with Him and with one another. And so, in a sense, it's becoming more and more foreign because of the urban context. And of course, there are things that we can do to help counteract this some, but it's a tough trend.
Interesting. So if there was somebody if somebody was watching these or learning about this kind of model that you're teaching, and they come from that traditional church background and they don't really have a lot of experience, but maybe they've started to hear about home church and trying to live this model out, would you have any advice for them? Or
first of all, God, I think, has used and will use all kinds of churches. Each kind of church has its strengths and weaknesses, things that it's better at, things that it's not so good at. I really believe and have the sense that our day is a day that's intended to have radical extension of the kingdom. It's not a day of defense and barricading the doors. And so the kind of simple churches that I'm promoting, that's their strength, is extending the kingdom and creating depth, but they don't have some of the other capacity for some of the specialized types of ministries that you might see in more traditional churches. But they're great at extending the kingdom and deepening people in their relationships and in their faith. And my sense is we don't have nearly enough of those kind of churches, and that is what we most need in our day. So I would encourage them to give it a chance. And you can't just do this theoretically. You have to jump in, get your feet wet. And so I would encourage you just to do that. Just jump in and, see how you like it. And if it's not for you, there's plenty of, legacy or traditional churches out there.
Yeah,
so
absolutely. I guess this is the last question that I have, and this is very broad, so it's hard to answer, but, this idea of simple church, and I really love what you're saying about, it kind of seems to be for everybody. If there is somebody that felt like this is something that I want to do, this is something I want to move forward, would you have any basic advice for them or something that you really want to make sure that they know?
I would say it's built on doing what you hear from God and sharing it with others. That comes down to the basic DNA of these groups. There are people out there who have been walking this way for a while, and feel free to ask them for advice, but the most important thing is spend time being intentional about listening to God. And if you're faithful in doing what He says and sharing it with others, He'll continue to speak more and more clearly to you. And He'll reveal more and more clearly what He wants you to do. And He'll ask bigger and bigger steps. But that is ultimately where we get our direction, is from Him, not necessarily modeling it after this person or that person, or being a part of this network or that network. That may happen, but it comes down to our ability to hear, respond, and share with others. And if we're faithful in doing that, He will be faithful to guide us. That's what it means to be a follower of Christ, right? My sheep hear my voice. They recognize my voice, and they follow me. And so ultimately, that's what it comes down to.